All right, I'd like to go ahead and call up Bethany, Domaine, that's right. Almost said Dominique, and Breanna Sharp from KIBOIS Domestic Violence Shelter.
So basically, like she has talked about, we serve the women in our community. It all starts with the community and referrals. Just when someone experiences domestic violence, then they call our crisis line. We have some brochures and it's available to you. And then the law enforcement, they complete an assessment, and they're a big part of our program. They call our crisis line, and once they refer, basically our next step is to get the women in the shelter into safety. And so after safety, we provide all basic necessities: food, clothing, just whatever they need. And then after that, we try to help them out with crisis case management. Do they need a job? You know, do they need birth certificates? Do they need IDs to get the job? So we do the whole setup for them and get them going. And then we do have some non-resident services. Basically, if they leave the shelter, they can go, or they can sign up for non-resident services. We have a relocation program that will help pay for first month's rent. First month's, you know, like your deposits on our utility assistance and all that stuff. We have a grant that pays for counseling because trauma, as we know, comes with some deep-seated issues most of the time. So we pay for that. We actually did lose some of that funding this year. And we are funded through the Attorney General's office, and we're accredited through them. So we try to hold ourselves to a high standard. We did get cut some funding through VOCA, but we are substantiated through KIBOIS, and that's where KIBOIS comes in. They carry us through when any of our funding, which, as y'all probably know, funding gets cut, you know, quite often in Oklahoma. So is there any services I'm missing?
So we do a program. She was talking about our non-resident program that we have, and we have those even though the non-residents don't live at the shelter, they're entitled to every benefit that the residents are entitled to, and so they get the counseling and they get any of the payment for IDs and birth certificates and things like that as well. There's group programs where we do domestic violence education classes. We do those for non-residents, it's once a week. And then for residents, they have it 3 times a week in shelter. And so they do that.
We do have a rape response. We respond to the emergency room. Just whoever's on call, we kind of just rotate out. And again, that goes through the emergency room, community, law enforcement. And just about everyone on our staff goes on call for that. And we're all trained, like I said, through the Attorney General's program. I actually have a master's degree in social work, and then a lot of my employees have their bachelor's degree. So in counseling or in the social services. I think, does that about wrap up our immediate services? And we brought some brochures and stuff to pass around in some of our cards, and then we brought like a printout of some of the programs that KIBOIS does. I know that y'all know about their veterans program that gets them into housing, and this just, they have CAT services, they provide funding for prescriptions. I mean, they have so many resources and programs, it's unfathomable. So we'll leave this, and they also help with taxes and stuff like that. It was such short notice, we couldn't get anyone else down here with us, but I think that's about it. We just, you know, focus on safety, rehabilitation, on the trauma, you know, and make sure they have those basic life skills. Because if you can't empower a woman to pay her own bills and to have an income and do her own checking account, then she's basically going to be stranded in that power and control wheel with the man at home, you know, and that's why a lot of them stay there. So we're there to empower.
How many are you serving now?
6. Right now, we have 6 due to COVID. We're trying to keep it between 6 and 8, but our max is at 12. We are in like a smaller house type place. And so we have 3 rooms and it has 4 bunk beds in it. And so we have a 30-day emergency stay is what is, you know, like in the stipulations, like Attorney General's program and stuff. But upon 2 weeks follow-ups, which Bethany provides and does all that, they can get an extended stay, and it's just a case by case. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
You said you go up to 12 and you have 6 right now.
Right.
Yes, yeah. So 12 is our max here at McAlester, yeah.
Do you see at different times it peaks more or less? Like,
You know, it just ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
It really does. There might be a week or 2 where you just hear crickets. And then, you know, you might get about 4 months where they're just always calling.
When this COVID all started, there was speculation that there might be an increase in domestic violence. And I was chief of the police department for the first 6 or 8 weeks of all this, but, and I did not notice it so much at that time. Have you noticed anything?
You know,
I think that I would say we have had more calls from the police departments because we've had more LAP calls.
we've had,
So, and we've had more calls in general because we're at 30 right now.
yeah, and I've only been there about a year, so I
I
can't
would say
really
due to
give you
COVID, we've
good
had more.
statistics on that. But we have been getting LAP calls.
More calls.
And we've actually been getting some calls from the sheriff's department, which we weren't before, and then we're getting some from Quinton PD, Hartshorn PD, and Haleyville PD. So we're pretty proud of that. But McAlester PD is still our #1 supporter. So we appreciate that.
I thought you were going to say problem.
No, our #1 supporters.
So basically, Pittsburgh County,
I'm sorry,
are
what?
we basically Pittsburgh County?
Yes, yeah. And then we have a shelter in Stigler too, which is Haskell. And they work a lot with Stigler PD. So. Yes.
Can you kind of walk me through, not in great detail, but what's the process? How does it work?
Well, there's like process for them to come into shelter or,
If I'm in a relationship and I need out,
Okay.
so, and I'm still there in the relationship, but
Like, how would you,
yeah,
Come
and
get
how do you come in and help?
so you would have to, there's different, you could either call the police and they could give you our information. They would help you make the call and everything to us. The way we get involved is through a crisis call, or if you knew, there's face-to-face, if you knew where our shelter was, or someone brought you to the shelter, the police brought you to the shelter, somehow you showed up there, we could do a face-to-face with you. Or just a crisis call is our main way to contact, because we can't just have people, we have to screen them before they can come into the shelter. So, usually they get our number, and so they call us, and we walk them through making sure they're safe first. Obviously, our main priority is safety. We want them to be not in a dangerous situation right then, because we would advise them to call the police instead of us right then, because we can't do anything right then. So as long as they're in a safe place at that moment, then we would begin to talk to them about making plans to, we'll see what their plans are. You know, what are they wanting? Do they want to leave right now? Do they want to stay, but they want safety tips to stay? There's all kind of options, you know, for them. It's just what they want. So we would begin processing with them about what they want. And then we would, if they do want to leave, then we could begin the process of shelter and seeing, you know, do we have space available? Is it, you know, are they in Pittsburgh County kind of thing? So we would go through that, just kind of planning with them. But safety is our main concern. So as long as they're safe, right then we can begin to make a plan of how to get them to either safety or our shelter or a hotel for the night, or we have funds for that too. Just getting them to a safe place, and then we can always work from there to get them to the shelter or to get them working on housing or to get them somewhere, but immediately getting them somewhere safe for the night. So it all starts with a crisis call, or if they happen to come to the shelter. So, yes.
So basically, they can't walk in, they have to be either referred to by a law enforcement agency or the hospital before they're.
They can call, they can just themselves, but, or they could walk up to the door, but there's a screening process that has to happen before, they can't just, it's not just open where they can just walk in and have a bed.
Okay, if the spouse and them are having a dispute, there's a lot of times they don't know what they want to do,
Right.
and they're confused and scared, which is understandable. But do you make home visits to those, or are they strictly to?
Due to safety, we can't.
You would not go to the home?
No, we wouldn't know, we wouldn't want to put any of our staff, especially in domestic violence. That's where a lot of people get killed.
Right.
And we don't even pretend to act like we're police, or we just are there to if we can plant the seed and let them know there is a place, that's the number one thing, because they say it takes a victim 7 to 11 times before they actually leave. And yeah.
One thing to note is you don't advertise where your physical building is, correct?
Yeah, due to address confidentiality, yeah.
Because, if you do, then the domestic abuser, chances are going to show up there.
Yeah. Basically, on our assessment form, on our crisis call sheet and what the law enforcement has, there's a lady named Jacqueline Campbell, and she's got all I think she has doctorates and all, she studied on women and trauma and domestic violence. She's come up with 20 very good questions that basically it is the indicators. It asks, like, does he try to choke you? Do you believe he will kill you? And then we assess that and we add that up, and then we have like these 3 columns. And if the caller, let's say they're a 22, that's very high risk. We need to start safety planning with them and say, okay, do we need to call the police for you right now? Do we need to have an officer meet you there and drive you to us? Do we need to call your mom? Do we need to call? And so the assessment and the crisis call it's based on, evidentiary support. And so it's a process. But like I said, if just someone in the community refers them to us, and we screen them, let's say they screen low, which would be like a 2, and that would be very low risk as far as if our shelter was full, but we would want to maybe then offer the non-resident services and say, okay, this is, like maybe you and him could use some education. Are y'all willing to, is he willing to work with you to get here, to do non-resident? Or, because we don't want to split up families if there's not a high risk, and if they're wanting to stay. But, yes.
Children as well?
What do you say? Children?
Children, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Is there an age limit on the children?
No, and we take boys and girls, and we help men too, which we don't bring men into shelter, but especially like in
We do help them though.
yeah, a sexual, assault response, we would use our funding, and we'd put them up at a motel after we were there and advocated with them. And we actually do a sexual response team out at the maximum security prison too. We're set up out there to do sexual assault response out there with some of the prisoners, and just kind of give guidance and give them our crisis number, So I think we might have hit on everything. We might have missed a couple things, but.
You mentioned the choking on the assessment, and I think, Chuck, you might know this, but I can't remember what the percentage is, but that's a really high risk. I think if it happens more than once, it's like over 75% is, it could, a little more likely end up in a death.
Yeah.
Well, I would offer this statistical bit. If you're being choked to the point of asphyxiation, then you're only seconds away from death anyway.
Right.
And that's why that correlation is so high. They may not even, in their mind, the person that's choking, may not think, I'm gonna try and kill you, but if it's gotten, this is what I always tell my victims, if it's at that point, it's too late to just assume that they're gonna calm down. You need some serious intervention, because at that point, when they're squeezing on your neck and cutting off your airflow, Oklahoma doesn't have an attempted murder charge. We have other charges, but that's kind of what it amounts to for me, because you're seconds away from death. It doesn't take very long for that to turn fatal. And that's why it's such a concern for us. We go to red levels on that when we see it, because it's a telltale sign that this person's at high risk.
And, you know, due to the lack of oxygen could lead to like dementia, or, you know, it just takes seconds to lose, you know, brain cells and all that. So, you know, being able to take care of yourself after the choking is a important thing. So I think that's all we got. Is there any more questions, or we appreciate y'all having us.
We get a picture.
Yeah.